90.3 WHPC now presents Law You Should Know. The law affects every aspect of our lives, our home, our jobs, and our recreational activities. Now, learn about the law and how to protect yourself against the loss of your liberty or property, and learn how to stand up for your rights and seek compensation when you have been wronged. Your host for Law You Should Know is attorney Kenneth J. Landau, a past dean of the Nassau Academy of Law, and frequently lectures to lawyers on ethics and avoiding problems with clients, and to the public on how to choose and use lawyers. This is Law You Should Know on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hi, this is Ken Landau, and welcome to Law You Should Know. Our guest today is Kelly McMenamin, and she's a professional organizer, and she's going to talk to us about how to better organize your law office or your business or your other professional office so it facilitates your workflow and creates the best possible impression to your colleagues and your clients. Kelly, welcome to Law You Should Know.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken.
Do people have maintained different levels of neatness in the office, and does it create, what's the best way to create a positive impression for your current and future clients and your colleagues as well?
Well, yes, how you organize is kind of hardwired in your brain, and there are people who just by their nature hide everything away and are very detail-oriented, and some that are bigger picture and more visual and have to have a lot of their organization out so they can see it and remember it. And those people, the ones that are visual and have it out, can sometimes leave the impression that they're messy. And, almost half the population are very detail-oriented. If anything, more than half the population is detail-oriented, and they're going to judge you based on that mess. And it's unfair because actually organization isn't about perfection. It's about if you can find things when you need them. And a lot of people who are messy actually are organized and know where everything is, even though to a detail-oriented person, it might look incredibly messy and no way can that person find a file. So in terms of clients, bosses, those superiors, you don't want that mess to give the wrong impression of whether you're organized or not.
And also in a law office, many things are done, some things are still done with paper, and a lawyer may need to, there might be certain rush projects that have to be done in a file or different rush projects that have to be done in a law office. So they have to find a way for keeping those files or those portions of the files in front of them that require action so they don't get lost in the pile, so to speak.
Yeah. What we do with people who are in a business that has a lot of paper and that they're the type of person who tends to pile paper, and everybody has a pile or two. That's what inboxes are, right? Or outboxes. But pilers tend to have a lot of piles. And really, we just tell them when we come in and work with them, or the advice in our book, Organize Your Way, it is you just need to put structure around what you already do. So by structure, I mean, if it's, all the piles are taking up your desk, you want to get basically another table next to your desk, and that's where your piles go, and your desk itself is for working. And you want to get open, transparent bins and put labels on them and put the piles in there. And that way other people can interact with them. That's the whole purpose of the piles. And you don't want to get lids because you need to see what's in your pile. Like you were saying, be able to retrieve a file and you'll know where it is in the pile if you can visually see it. And another thing would be, if you don't have a lot of room for extra tables in your office. I work in Manhattan, so space is always at a premium, but always go vertical and find bookshelves or just, mount shelves in the walls for a piling system like I'm describing.
So there's got to be some kind of method and some kind of neatness for those piles. And the desk should be clean. So it looks like, and I guess you're just having papers that you're looking at in that moment about one matter or a single aspect of that matter, and everything else can be on deck.
Right.
Or somewhere in the background.
Kind of off to the side on a table or a bookshelf. And, sometimes these people might have more than one or two in-process files. And so we recommend those accordion file holders that can expand and hold a couple different files, and you can easily grab what you need. And then the deeper storage is the bookshelves or a credenza or a table nearby. And it'll help tremendously to have these things in actual bins that are transparent. It transforms it into a real system.
And do you have a way of helping people organize paper files if for those who are still dealing with paper, so they can find important documents, or within a file keeping different types of documents in different portions of the file?
Well, people who are visual, I often have them have different Post-it notes. So if they within a file are trying to look for something, they really are the kind of people who like know that something is a little bit after, say, the red Post-it note, or in between the red and the yellow. And so I recommend doing that. And these people, the more visual types, usually have Post-it notes on hand for a myriad of other things, whether it's reminders on their computer screen or on their bulletin board. So it's usually kind of something that's easy to incorporate into a new system because they already have it on hand.
And the new system to replace many Post-it notes, would it be a to-do list or some kind of other way to establish priorities and reminders?
Well, you know what? I usually only recommend to-do lists for people who don't have it clear in their mind. That, you kind of know, like, I'm a to-do list person because if I have it in my brain, it never happens. But if it's written down, it always happens. And there are personality types, we call them funds. They can be forced to do to-do lists, but they have it in their head and it's very clear and they always remember it. So unless you know you're that person, and you usually do know, I would recommend to-do lists. And you'd be surprised. There's a lot of people who are to-do list people who don't have them. And I'm like so amazed that they've survived this long without it.
Is there any relationships between whether someone is neat or less so and how much of a procrastinator they are? At least in their own judgment.
In some instances, yes. There is there's smarts and there's organics, and they're both pilers, but there are some smarts that are procrastinators and some organics that are procrastinators. And with them, I try to help them create a deadline in their head that'll force them to do something. At home, when they're doing stuff at home, not the office, I'll joke like, invite your judgmental mother-in-law over if you want to clean your living room up. But in the office, you just want to create a deadline. Maybe you're going to present something to your boss or something, and that's the deadline that you're creating. But it kind of like something that'll put the fear of God in you is really what that advice is, creating a deadline to get things done.
And does it help if everyone takes a few minutes a day or some period during the week to straighten out things, to discard things they don't need, to refile things and get them out of their office if they no longer need them?
Yeah, for certain types, 100%, especially the people like classics and funds who cannot stand clutter. It's so much easier if you just kind of get rid of random things in your desk. Like, I'm on a conference call on board and I go open my desk drawer and I'm like, oh my God, is this candy from 2 years ago? And you can just get rid of it, or your purse, like you're sitting there waiting at like the DMV, just go through it really quickly. So a lot of times I tell people to, use those boring moments in life to declutter, because it really is in the moment. All of a sudden that looks more fascinating than waiting, looking around the DMV is, throwing out gross candy or tissues in your purse or bag.
Okay, I like to remind our listeners that we're talking about organizing your law office and resolving any conflict that it may cause. Our guest is Kelly McMenamin, and she's also the author of a book, Organize Your Way, and is available as a consultant to have offices or individuals in those offices be a little bit neater, and has a great deal of free information available on her website. Kelly, just tell us about your website, your book, and some of the information available in your book and your website.
Sure. Thanks, Ken. Our website is pixiesdidit.com. That's pixiesdidit.com. And our book is Organize Your Way, and it's available on our website, pixiesdidit.com, but also on Amazon as well. And really, it's all the simple strategies we give our clients on how to work with their personality type, work with how their brain is wired to set up systems that are almost seamless because it's what you do by nature, and we just help you figure out how to put structure around it and make it official.
So do you have to intervene more with the people who are less neat, or there's interventions that you help the people that are too neat in an office setting, or you can never be too neat?
Well, you can be too neat in that you can have files so detailed you forget what the file is because it should be part of a grander category. But in general, no, because everyone's so busy, nobody's as neat as they would like to be, even the detail-oriented types, classics and funds. I would say that in general, usually it's the classics and funds who hire us when they're really irritated by messier people, smarts and organics in office environments or in their homes.
So I think you said fire us, right? So I'm just saying, if you're, let's say, on a job interview, is it important to figure out the style of that interviewer so you make appropriate conversation or you come across an appropriate way? What if there are clashing styles in the office? What if you can't stand walking by the messy office of someone else?
Well, that's really often why we're hired, is to work with the messier types, because usually tidier people are pretty tidy in the office, because the office is, when you think about it, you could be fired. And so everyone's that tries to be their best selves. And so the tidy people are usually super tidy in the office, even tidier than they are at home sometimes. But the messier people, it just is who they are. They pile paper. It's some, and they often don't notice the piles. So a lot of times what's irritating to a tidy person, the messier person doesn't even know. And so usually I'm coming in and trying to figure out a system that will work with the nature of the messier person, the piles, but at the same time be aesthetically pleasing to most of the rest of the office. And
who's more productive in an office? Is the messier person more productive because they're not spending as much time filing?
Well, yeah,
or the neat person because they can find things quicker and move on.
But in the end of the day, it depends, because an organized person can be imperfect in their organizing if they know where everything is. And a lot of times people that are, who are thought to be messy know where everything is and can find them. I mean, we started this business, Pixies did it. My sister and I are polar opposites. I always joke that she's the messy organizer. I'm your typical neat organizer. But when I need to find a file sometimes, and I'm thinking, God, that's like 10 years ago. Where would I have put it? I'm searching around. In between, while I'm looking, I will always email my sister and ask her, and she finds it before I do all the time. It's just.
Does the neater person tend to be the perfectionist? So, and while the less neat would say done is better than perfect, and just, finish a project, get it done in an appropriate manner, but not go crazy about it?
Usually. There are people who are super tidy who are also practical and can let things go and don't care as much about aesthetics, whereas sometimes a messier person really cares about aesthetics and not so much about, they'll care about decor in a way that a very detail-oriented practical person won't. But decor does matter, and it does make things look nicer. We do incorporate that as part of our advice in our book, Organize Your Way, that, ugly file cabinets are ugly, and, there's attractive ones. And sometimes people file more when they have a more attractive office. They'll spend more time in there because it's enjoyable to be there.
And maybe as you help people to find an organization system and a few steps toward organization that work with them, you're not just going to give them a file cabinet and say, do it. You're going to find some system and colors and folders and arrange their office so it works for them.
Yeah, I mean, there's the personality type funds, for example, they love color. They're motivated by it. So, I'm not going to buy them some gray, metal, horrible Soviet-era style file cabinet. I'm going to buy them something that they are excited about. I'm going to buy them office products or help them buy, office products that kind of make them excited to write and be there and, get them jazzed. And they'll actually be more productive than if they just had your standard issue stuff. These things seem small, but they actually add up in terms of productivity and motivating people to. And
even if they're not, your coworkers or your bosses or your clients may make judgments about you that are not true, but can sometimes negatively affect you.
Yeah, and I think you can notice that if you're known as the messy person, and before when I was talking about my sister being really good at finding things, you'll notice a boss or a client is sometimes when you find it, oh, here it is. They're almost surprised and shocked, because usually when you see a mess, you're thinking the person has no idea where anything is. And that can be the case sometimes. But, really, if you just put a little bit of structure around what you do naturally, even if it's messy, You can keep your system. You just put more structure. You put labels on it. You put things in bins, open, transparent bins. Put them away from your active workspace, and all of a sudden somebody coming in, whether it's a client, a superior, or even just a colleague, they're going to see that there is a whole system. The filing cabinets were, invented in the late, 1800s. And before that, people used piling systems, and there were still neat people back then, and there were messier people. So yeah, I'm pretty sure piling systems for a neat person were pretty neat back then. And that's really
the piling systems sometimes represent a project, that the worker or the lawyer or the accountant has to review or do some work on. They're not keeping files that they're not working on out in the open. It's stuff they have to do soon or in the near future.
Right, but sometimes there's stuff that's like interim, and then they're afraid if it goes away, and that's really where the piling system comes in, because most law offices, when something's done, like you're putting it to bed, you're filing it away, because, what we joke is that for visual messy types, filing cabinets are like mausoleums. Like, you close that door and you're not seeing that thing again. And so the piling system is the interim, and you can have an even closer piling system on your desk, the accordion file or a couple files that are just super active. But, the interim, can be a pretty big system in your office, and you'll still be able to grab things when you need them when they do come up.
Is it because some people believe out of sight, out of mind? So if they don't have it in front of them, they'll forget something needs to be done, or something, needs to be done soon?
Yes, but it's not believe. It is out of sight, out of mind, and so they forget it. And then when you think about the main point of organization is finding things, if it's hidden away, your office looks neater, but then you don't find it because you've totally forgotten about it or where it is, and you might be, and that'll make you look even more disorganized because you can't find things and more of a mess, even if your office looks tidier, which is why, our advice is really to figure out your organizing style. You can go on our website, pixiesdidit.com, or get our book, Organize Your Way. And once you figure out who you are, like, oh my God, I am a piler. I know I'm a piler. I have like 10 piles in my office right now. You build systems around that rather than going by the advice of maybe a boss or another organizer who's going to tell you like how to learn how to file, because you might just forget these things exist. And that's, to your detriment as well, fighting who you are by nature, because it'll actually hurt your productivity.
So someone can go to your website and just take a little quiz that will help determine their style at home and at work. Mm-hmm. And then what they can do about it as a first step.
First step. It'll also, if you have an employee who has a lot of piles and you don't understand them, you can read about them, and all of a sudden a light will go off and you'll realize, oh wait, that person actually isn't a total mess. They might have a rhyme and a reason to what they do.
Now, is there a correlation between their organizational style and how well they do in their field? If they're an accountant, a lawyer, or a scientist, or something else?
Not per se, but our joke is that lawyers tend to have the most pilers by nature. And I think a little bit of that is that pilers, their brains are just really big picture. And what I mean by that is their first instinct is they look at kind of the whole big picture and then drill down to the facts. And this is never 100% when I talk about it. I'm generalizing. But because of that, a lot of lawyers tend to be pilers, and a lot of writers tend to be pilers. And so they're good at their job because of how their brain's wired, and they, pile because of how their brain's wired. But, when you try to change it, it might impact how well they are, how, well they can remember things, how well they can retrieve things, and that could impact your productivity at work. So I always tell people, go with who you are. It's easier.
Is that kind of looking at the big picture? Is it transferable to looking at a video screen or a digital display, or they really need to have the item in front of them?
Well, if you're talking about like in terms of like a digital calendar versus a physical calendar,
or a portion of the file is what I mean. Can they translate that detail orientation to looking at it, or they really need to see everything and drill down on what's important?
Oh, actually, there's a lot of people, and that's why I was asking about the calendar, who physically like to actually print things out and read them. It is different for quite a few people. And there's nothing wrong with that. If your brain is wired that it just isn't the same seeing on a screen, then print it out. And it's the same for, writing out to-dos in a notebook versus on a screen. That sometimes the act of writing something out helps you remember it. So whether you're making...
Or marking up a document.
That's what I'm thinking. It's like if you're making notes, you're going to remember that more and where the change was specifically than if you're actually just physically doing it with a keyboard in there. You might not remember it as well. And, that might just be like the hands connection, writing with your brain.
Okay. I just want to remind our listeners, you're listening to Law You Should Know on 90.3 WHPC. We're talking about a better organized office or a law office. And our guest is Kelly McMenamin, and she is the author of Organize Your Way, and she also consults with lawyers and individuals about being better organized at home or at work. Does your dress or demeanor or work ethic say anything about your organizing style, whether you're more like Oscar or Felix? Can you be messy and still be a neat dresser? Or sharp dresser?
A lot of times it does correlate but yes, you can still be neat.
Relatively.
Especially in the office, because everybody knows, you gotta, it's like in the olden days, you'd put on your Sunday's best for going to church. And it's kind of the same thing if you're going into the office or you're going to be in a Zoom call that, you have to be presentable. So even somebody who's messy knows how to do that. I would say, in Zoom calls, for me as an organizer, whenever I see a virtual background, I'm always wondering what's behind them. Now, every once in a while, obviously, something you can do, you're stuck in a bad room, but I would tell people to kind of think about finding a place, a background that has, organization behind you or attractiveness other than a virtual screen, because people do wonder. It's kind of funny.
Okay. And it's important because the visualization is their first impression of you, whether they're a client, a coworker, or someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same thing. If you're going on an interview, everybody wears specific things. And sometimes that interview is a client interviewing you to hire you. And whether that's on Zoom or in person, it matters both what you're wearing and what's behind you.
Especially once we return to the office.
Yeah.
Can you help companies to have, a higher organizational quotient to help people be a little bit neater, to help the office work a little more smoothly?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I'd tell anyone, coming back after people have been at home and been able to be their shoes off self, that you want to kind of set up, within community rooms, reestablish the ground rules of what's really important to them, whether it's conference rooms, kitchens, et cetera. And then also like the bare minimums in offices, but also because people have been at home. And if you do want to encourage people to be in the office, to let them have a little bit of freedom, but, kind of just set the base standards so that, some people might have piling systems. So if you're going to have piles, make sure you have room for piles and that it isn't something like on the floor, et cetera, but rather on a surface that's appropriate for that, et cetera.
And do you also want to help prevent stereotypes or conflict between people with different styles, whether they're coworkers or a boss or an assistant?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, it's whenever you're having discussions, a conflict between people, it's just trying to get people to understand that certain people's brains are wired certain ways and other ones are wired other ways. And once you can kind of get there, I guess, understand that, then you can understand people's proclivities, basically, especially the ones that annoy you.
But at the same time, do you want to help people, if you feel that too messy is detrimental for the visualization or for the product that you're turning out, do you have, can a company stage an intervention so there's less mess or less perceived disorganization?
Yes, preferably.
And how would they take the first step on that?
So first you hire me. That's the first step. Pixie did it.
And how will you broach it with the person, the targets of that?
Usually messy people know they're messy. Somebody has told them before. So this is rarely a surprise. They don't see it, but they've been told it, because almost 75% of the population are detail oriented. Like 50% are super neat, super tidy, detail oriented. Then the other 25% are detail oriented, but maybe flexible with time. and not as rigid in that way. But that's almost 70% detailed people, and the messy people, the other 25%, they've been told many times, whether it's their mom, their teacher, etc. So it's never kind of really, they're never shocked. So it should never be something you're scary about. But if anything, you could say like, what would you need to kind of fit in with the basic rules we have, because we can't have, let's say they have piles everywhere. I've seen it before where there's piles all over the floor. Like we can't have this from like a fire code,
so what are some other things a boss could say just to bring their standards up a little bit? We're having an important visitor, or a VIP is coming, or we're going to have Friday afternoon cleanups before the happy hour.
Yeah, what I would say is deadlines for especially a lot of messy types really work. So, but be specific of what you need to have done. Like the floor needs to have no piles, or you need to have piles that are specific in bins, on shelves, etc., or, limit them to 5 piles, those type of things. And from there, the person can kind of come up with a system that'll work with who they are. But deadlines really work. And I would say that if you really care in your office, especially, after everybody's kind of reintegrating into a office workspace from being at home, that if you have decluttering once a week or once a week's a lot, but once a month or a couple times a year, that really it isn't then eating into somebody's work time, that you're actually setting it aside as a company to do it. And if it is a priority, then make the time to make it a priority.
Can you also offer them help? Can one of the colleagues or one of the support staff just help you? And the key is to start with files they don't need, to just get them back into out of their office, so they have fewer files sitting around.
Yes,
stripping hazards.
100%. But I would say that you always need to have systems, because it's just going to happen again. And so if that support staff comes in and they help them take out all the files that they're not using anymore, then I would kind of say also you probably need to have a system in place where the person can say, this pile, to whoever the support staff is, I'm going to put it right there. And whenever I'm done with stuff, you can at any point in time take it and put it away in actual file cabinets, somewhere else in the office, the deep storage. And that way you don't have the buildup. So when you put a system in place like that, then you tend to not have the same problem coming up over and over again.
Okay, I know, Kelly, that you can help lawyers or others organize their homes or their offices better, to build it better, especially after COVID. Just tell us your website again and your book information.
Our book is Organize Your Way, Simple Strategies for Every Personality, and it's available on Amazon as well as our website, pixiesdidit.com. That's pixiesdidit.com, as well as lots of free advice on everything in the office or even in your home and life.
And I would like to thank Kelly McMenamin for being our guest and telling us about a book, Organize Your Way, and the organizing services she provides to individuals or companies. I just want to remind our listeners, if you want to listen to the show again or tell someone else about it, it's available as a podcast, along with many other shows from Law You Should Know at nccradio.org. And please join us again next week at this same time on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, for another program on Law You Should Know.